Since Libertarianists and I collaborated to make our 5-part series debunking Thunderfoot's nonsense about the Hyperloop, he's released another couple of videos on the subject, which do absolutely nothing whatsoever to respond to any of the criticism we've levied against him. In the first of these two videos, Thunderfoot looks at the recent SpaceX contest to test different Hyperloop systems, and shows that he understands nothing whatsoever about what this test was all about and why it was being done.
So the test track they built was about 4/5 of a mile long. Seriously, they couldn't even build a mile-long test track.
Just like the first test we covered, we see that Thunderfoot somehow expects engineers to be testing all sorts of things at the same time, and that's just not how it's done. You test one part of the design at a time, doing integration tests later in the development process. This was a test of certain systems components, which only required a short stretch of track to work. These components will operate the same way no matter the speed or length of track. The point is to just see if they work. Building a large-scale test track would not only have been jumping the gun, it would have been foolishly expensive as well. Again, this is Thunderfoot showing his extreme lack of understanding of engineering. As we've said before, all new technologies start out small and build up from there.
This was such a plausible and clearly financially viable project, they went straight in and started hiring experienced engineers to design this, right? No. They had a design competition for students.
Yeah? So? Why don't you mention who some of those teams were? Like the team from the University of Delft, who have already built the world's fastest hydrogen fuel cell race car. No, let's just use the word students with derision, like we're talking about primary school students using construction paper or something.
Which I'm sure will yield superb results.
So yeah, Thunderfoot made it about how far the pods went, when that had nothing to do with the systems that were being tested. Again, he has no clue what was being tested and why and what the results mean.
Different teams want to go to different pressure levels, but if we go down to like a fairly low level, it'll probably take about 30 minutes.
It takes longer than the proposed journey time from Los Angeles to San Francisco.
Would allow passengers to get from Los Angeles to San Francisco in less than 30 minutes.
Just to get into the Hyperloop.
This point would only be valid if this were a test of the vacuum systems. It wasn't. The systems they used here were never meant to be analogous to the ones used on the actual Hyperloop.
But whatever, it's a prototype. I'm sure once the pods are in there, they will travel at incredible speeds. I mean, we were promised, 700 miles an hour.
This wasn't a speed test, Thunderfoot. They weren't even trying to reach full speed in this test. Why don't you cover the systems the test was actually checking? Maybe because if you did, you wouldn't be able to lie and use incredulity and ridicule to try and discredit an invention you clearly have no hope of understanding.
There was the roomy traveling comfort war design. There was the slightly bigger, but not much, Delft design. Then there was the absolutely tiny MIT entry. And only one of those made it to the end of the track.
Okay, so how about you tell us what that means? What systems being tested required the pod to traverse the full length of the track to properly test? Was the shorter travel distance the fault of those systems and not for some other reason? Thunderfoot doesn't say. Probably because he doesn't know. He's not trying to understand what this test was. He's just looking for any excuse at all to ridicule the Hyperloop. He has his foregone conclusion, and anything that happens will be interpreted in that light, regardless of what reality shows.
You see, these vehicles are actually pushed up to speed by an electric vehicle.
Again, so what? This was not a test of propulsion. That already happened, remember? And you ridiculed it because of how fast it was!
Seriously, dudes, your countdown was longer than your maglev train journey. Which means the MIT pod here, which was selected from one team out of about 1,200, the absolute cream of the crop, and it's to travel about 50 meters or something. And it's released the pod, and the pod stopped.
Yeah, you're laughing. Even though that test was successful! Because what they were testing was not propulsion like you're dishonestly making it out to be, but of, among other things, its levitation system, which worked absolutely the way it was supposed to at that speed. In fact, it started levitating as slow as 35 miles per hour. The award the MIT group was given was for safety and reliability.
Indeed, the winning team actually only managed to go slightly further on its own. And it releases the pod and the pod stops.
And if this were a test of propulsion systems, it would be cause for ridicule. Unfortunately for Thunderfoot, it wasn't. It was a test of the safety systems to see if they could manage the 80 km/h speed. And they did. Again, these are the same people who built the fastest hydrogen fuel cell race car in the world. Do you really think that if they'd been given a speed challenge that they wouldn't have risen to it? Although it does cause one to wonder why these pods stopped as quickly as they did. Maybe because the designers were morons, unlike the oh-so-brilliant Thunderfoot. Or maybe, just maybe, it's because they were also testing braking systems? Nah, it couldn't be that. Must have been the first one.
And just look at all of the dust this thing's throwing up.
Thunderfoot, that isn't dust. That's water condensation. You know, the kind you generally get in low pressure? You'd think someone with a PhD in chemistry would know that. And it has nothing to do with the test, and making it to the end of the track was no requirement whatsoever.
Going at about 80 kilometers an hour. This is 50 miles per hour. It's not quite 700 miles an hour.
No one was trying to make 700 miles per hour, Thunderfoot. If it weren't for lies, you wouldn't have any points to make at all. This test was all about safety, reliability in braking and other systems, fault tolerance, performance, and overall design and innovation. It was not a test of speed or distance, and yet those are the only things you focused on.
I mean, shit, at this rate, it's not that the Hyperloop just won't be able to challenge cars. It might even struggle to challenge walking.
See, it's the only thing that matters to Thunderfoot. And if you go by his video, you're left with the impression that this was the only thing being tested, when this is one of the things that specifically wasn't being tested.
What gets me, though, is what were they thinking? If you want to demonstrate that this Hyperloop thing is possible, you would need a track at least long enough to get up to speed, about 10 times this size minimum.
What gets me, Thunderfoot, is why you're so bent on deliberately misrepresenting this test and what it was all about. In order to even make it to this point, the pods had to pass a number of different tests, including structural tests and vacuum chamber tests. Once in the track, they had to pass a number of different tests about safety, reliability, and other factors that have nothing to do with anything Thunderfoot actually talked about. Something else we need to mention. This also has nothing to do with any of the designs the three main Hyperloop companies, Hyperloop One, Hyperloop Transportation Technologies, and Transpod are working on. And Thunderfoot is behaving like this test is the be-all and end-all of Hyperloop technology. In fact, looking back on his other videos, I'm not even sure he realizes that these are all separate companies that have no affiliation with Elon Musk or SpaceX. Let's put this into perspective. In 2004, DARPA ran their first grand challenge, a driverless car competition in the Mojave Desert on a 150-mile route. The vehicle that traveled the farthest only made it about 7 1/3 miles when it went into a hairpin turn and got stuck in an embankment. All of the other cars ended up stuck or broken down. One of them even rolled over. If Thunderfoot had been making these kinds of videos then, he would have laughed at it, saying that this proves that the whole idea of driverless cars is impractical and even dangerous. And yet, today, less than 15 years later, they're a reality with a proven safety and reliability record. So, Thunderfoot says this is a Hyperloop crashing and burning. From our perspective, the only thing that burns is Thunderfoot stupid. There's one more video he's posted recently, which we'll get to later. Stay tuned.